Who muted my microphone? Now we're good. Okay, so let me try that again. My name is Mike Hess. I am a registered respiratory therapist, registered pulmonary function technologist, COPD educator slash advocate. I wear a lot of different hats for a lot of different people, but my biggest passion is to help make sure people get the information they need to help make sure they are partners in their own care with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. I also like to advocate for that and make sure that my friends in the clinical side of things are taking this as seriously as we should. And last but not least, I like to get the public health aspect of things rolling as much as possible. COPD is, of course, a very underrecognized and underappreciated burden on the healthcare system, not only at the personal level with symptom burdens and costs for medications and the like, but also the fact that we don't recognize it very well and don't treat it very well leads to a lot of unnecessary care when it comes to things like hospitalizations and stuff like that. Of course, right now, hospitalizations are at the forefront of everybody's mind with the whole novel coronavirus crisis going on. The last thing you want to do is get into the hospital, go to the emergency department, anything like that. But the usual places for you to get your care are often not available. You know, if you're usually going to pulmonary rehabilitation or the gym or support groups, things like that, those things are often kind of shut down for a little while. We just heard here in Michigan, our governor is extending our stay-at-home order another couple of weeks until the end of this month, following national guidance. So that tells us, that we're going to be together for a little while here. So my job is, again, to get you the information that you need as a person with COPD, as a clinician, as a caregiver, as whoever it is you are that has an interest in the COPD community. We have these things going live on Facebook, of course. That's where many people are watching. We're also live on YouTube. Go over to YouTube and search for COPD Navigator if you prefer to use that interface. And we are trying, once again here, so I'm looking off to the side now and then, we're trying to do a live Twitter stream. Looks like a couple of people might be watching there. Do appreciate everybody, regardless of channel or method, coming in and spending some of your Thursday afternoon / evening / morning / wherever you are with us here in the world of COPD. So, first thing I'm going to do is want to get started with kind of the public health aspect of things, and forgot to pull this up before we got going here. Michigan Common Formulary. So while we're doing this, make sure you're getting your questions in, whichever angle your comment area is. Make sure you're getting your questions in. It could be related to COPD, it could be related to this whole novel coronavirus deal, COVID-19, the disease that comes from that. We can take some asthma questions, we can take pulmonary rehabilitation questions, medication questions, oxygen questions. We can take stories. I've really been hoping to get some people to share a little bit more stories. You know, of course, we see a lot of bad news out there. We see a lot of strife and debate. There is a tremendous debate going on right now in my world of respiratory therapy. There's been a lot going on. A lot of folks are stressed out. A lot of folks are upset right now, and we're having some miscommunications and things like that. I'm hopeful we can get some of that stuff kind of resolved soon. But we all need to hear some good, positive news, some good stories. I know we're getting some people who are coming out and talking about people coming off the ventilators a little bit more now with the COVID-19 disease. We're seeing people going home. We're seeing some stories of recovery. So share any of those things. Share how you're getting through isolation, how you're getting through physical distancing, what best practices you've seen for allowing us to continue to be social at a distance. Everybody talks frequently about this whole social distancing thing, but if we look at being social at a distance, we can keep our physical safety, but we still have that human kind of connection here. So get those comments in, get those stories in. I really appreciate everybody taking some time to share all that with you. Where I'm going with the actual talk for the day is, as it happens right now, we have in Michigan, we have what's called a common formulary. A lot of our folks who are on Medicaid actually have their Medicaid administered through a private insurance company, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Aetna, all those types of companies. And what Michigan did a couple of years ago was decide that regardless of what company you have, you all have to have, there's a common formulary. Each one of these companies has to have the same list of medications that the state puts out there and goes through that. And every now and then, as you might expect, they do invite some public commentary. They have made it a little bit easier in the last year or two to get to the public comment area, which is nice. But it's still also not that easy. And if you're not aware of when the comment period is, it's really difficult to add your comments and make your voice heard. As it happens, the public comment period for what they describe as the asthma allergy COPD medication class is right now. So it's from now until the middle of May. So we have about 5 weeks, a little less than 5 weeks right now to get that done. And so if you are interested, what we're going to do, we're going to, let's see, copy that email. We're going to put it on the video itself. We're going to put that here for Michigan Common Formulary Input. So I'm dropping an email address in both the video and the watch party, so that regardless, we've got a watch party going on Facebook and a couple of different groups. So So we got that going out there. This is an email address you can use. We can actually, if you're curious, you can go to their website. I'll actually drop a link to the website in there too. You have to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page. But this will give you a little bit more insight also as to what's going on and all that stuff. If you happen to be living in Michigan, you happen to be on Medicaid, this is definitely something that affects you. So we definitely want to hear your input. The common formulary, I'll get on a soapbox a little bit here because I'll put on my advocate hat. The common formulary has done an absolutely abysmal job over the last few years recognizing the importance of the different types of inhalers. You know, we've got our standard meter dose inhalers. We've got our dry powder inhalers. We've got nebulizers. But the common formulary kind of treats all these like they're exactly the same. Of course, they're not. Anybody who has gone from one device or another can certainly speak to that. And we also know that when you have multiple devices, multiple different kinds of inhalers, or if you have to switch from one to another, especially when it's not a clinically indicated thing to do, we know that you have more problems. That's where the science is. We know that people have more issues when they have to have multiple devices or have to go back and forth, which is why it's critically important that regardless of who the payer is, whether it's the Medicaid folks, whether it's Medicare, whether it's private insurance, whatever it is, we need to make sure that folks are understanding that all of these devices work differently. And in order to do that, they need to hear from you. They need to hear from me. They need to hear from you. They need to hear from all the clinicians, all the folks involved in the COPD, asthma, and allergy communities, again, what they call it here in Michigan, and let them know that we have to have options. These decisions cannot simply be made on the basis of cost because they have to be made for clinical reasons. So, hopefully, again, that's my public health hat on there. This is Public Health Week, so hopefully you all can get on board with that. The other question or the other ask I would have, I'm going to do this at the beginning of the show for a change. Please like, share, subscribe, follow, whatever terminology, depending on what platform you're watching this. We need to work together to get the awareness and advocacy stuff out there for COPD. I'm certainly not the only voice, so please be sure that you're looking for voices like I work with, I think John might be joining us here. a fantastic gentleman by the name of John Linnell, who is on the U.S. COPD Coalition with me. The COPD Coalition has a Facebook page, has a website. Please, let's make sure that we're sharing all of this information out there, because we know that right now everybody is talking about this coronavirus, but this will pass. As horrific and as troubling and all the other words that we can put out there as the situation is, certainly nothing to make light of, but eventually we will get past it. This is not like a world ending. This isn't the asteroid coming in to knock out the planet or anything like that. And when we get to the other side, we're still going to have, well, even now, even before we get to the other side, we still have COPD to take care of. We still have asthma and cystic fibrosis and diabetes and heart disease and lung cancer and all these things to deal with. We can't let these communities, particularly the COPD community, which has gone under-recognized for a really long time, we can't let any of these communities be forgotten. So thank you, John, for showing in today. John, it's been very flattered to have his support for a long time. He's done a fantastic job on his own, of course, advocating, and he is a stellar voice, and can't say enough good about the man. So thank you, John, for tagging in today. Appreciate you stopping by. Again, we're waiting on some of those questions to come through. One thing we're gonna, let's see what else we got. Here we go. Nope, that's just my comments there. So one thing one thing I do also like to do is let's see, is that, yeah, that's my actual page there. Usually when we're not in the middle of a pandemic and a quarantine and isolation and all that stuff, I like to have a little show called Breathe TV, where I go through and talk about a topic of the day, share some COPD news, do that about every other week, so it's the news of the past 2 weeks, and then of course have the question and answer like we're doing here, because we know that there's a lot of access issues right now. We kind of moved that to an everyday option here in the home studio, which is fun. But also still like to dig around and see if we've got any other news coming through. As I've mentioned many times so far, this is often a little bit of a slow time right now, when the weeks leading up to what's usually the American Thoracic Society conference, where a lot of information comes out. That, of course, is canceled this year. And likely we'll be seeing a lot of stuff coming online soon. Actually have one new news item on one of the common websites here. Let's see if we can pull that up. Lung Association advises COPD patients to keep with treatments in the pandemic. So this is out of the American Lung Association, which is, this is, of course, important information, because we know that there's a lot of information flying around about this COVID deal. We know that there's a lot going on. And one of the things that first came out was, well, if you're doing corticosteroids, maybe you shouldn't be doing corticosteroids with this because it's making people worse. And then a lot of folks were like, oh, I'm on an inhaled corticosteroid, I should stop taking that. And as the information has matured, as we've seen a little bit more coming in there, that's not a great idea. We want people to maintain on their current controller maintenance regimen. Different parts of the world call it different things. We want to make sure that you're staying with the things that are keeping you healthy, because again, the last thing you want to do is head to the emergency department, head to let's see, I've got Andy Barker popping in. Nice to see you, Andy. So the A&E department, I believe, over across the pond there, we don't want you going to a place like that, because first of all, a lot of these places are overwhelmed right now, and frankly, we don't want you to get sick. So if we can maintain you at home easier, then that's the way to do it. So make sure that you are maintaining your controller regimen, your everyday type of stuff. And that's not even just me saying that. That is the American Lung Association. I believe the COPD Foundation has issued guidance to that effect. I know a lot of those other places are saying those things. So also, if you can, make sure that you are, one thing they mention here is cigarette smoking and vaping are linked to lung inflammation and lowered immune function. So if you, now of course this is easier said than done, but if you are in the process of trying to quit, please keep that up. I know again over in England they just launched at least a regional campaign, a new one to get people to quit smoking again. That is constantly an issue here in the States. Particularly now with vaping that was popping up right before we went right from vaping problems into COVID problems. So if you're able to cut back on some of these things or quit altogether, that's fantastic. Now, I also know that in the middle of a crisis when there's so much uncertainty and stress and all that stuff is not a great time to change habits. So if you're not able to do that, please don't beat yourself up too much about it. This is not me scolding you or shaking my finger or anything. This is just me saying, if you can, make it so. In the words of one of my favorites here, Captain Picard. You may notice I decided to go with a non-respiratory shirt today just to kind of switch things up. You may also have noticed that I am a little bit of a sci-fi fan, so decided to go with the old Trek today. So, we're going to go to John here for our first question of the day. What is perhaps new about the antibody test to determine not only does somebody have COVID-19, but perhaps had it in the past? And will this test help in studies to identify who is more susceptible, who recovers, who is simply asymptomatic, different phenotypes perhaps? Yes, so fantastic question. And again, this is an area where a lot of the information is still evolving because at first, we didn't even know if anybody was surviving this thing. And then we did see people coming through okay, people who now in hindsight probably had it. Of course, in the U.S., we've had very limited testing availability, so it's been really problematic to get good epidemiological data for who is surviving, what trends are we seeing. And that has been a challenge for a lot of our treatment management plans. We're also now seeing that in certain cases, there is the possibility for reinfection. We've seen a couple of different reports from that from around the world where people have gotten sick, recovered, maybe gotten sick again. And so now there's a lot of thought about maybe this may end up being kind of like the flu where it comes around once a year, once every couple of years, something like that. Of course, the flu is here every year, but this is going to be kind of cyclical. Once we get through it, maybe every 6 months, depending on how we do the social or the isolation kind of stuff. We'll have to see here. So I want to see. Andy says 100,000 tests per week over here. That would be. I think that's pretty much better than what we're doing. I don't have the exact number there, but we need the more tests we can get, the better, because that's where we get our data from. That's where we get what's called the case fatality rate, which is the number that you see a lot thrown out there, where if you get it, you have a 4% mortality, or if you have a 10% mortality, or a 0.1% mortality. We need to get all of these numbers. In order to do that, we need to have some more testing. So let's see. Let's see if there was anything new in the last day or so. What I have been seeing, let's see. So we have, there are a lot of, right off the bat, there's a lot of information about, within the last day or so, about these new tests for antibodies. So we'll go to one that I suspect is not going to be the most ideal, because this is coming from a site called MarketWatch. So we're probably talking more about the economic ramifications, which, again, I don't want to minimize that, but we generally stick a little bit more clinical here. So the FDA has said serological tests can one day decide when people can return to work. So one of the other things, and then we're also talking about potentially people being able to donate plasma after they have recovered, because That's how we can develop kind of the antibodies. If you think if we've got any other medical history buffs out there, it's kind of how we went about cracking smallpox, in a similar way. I guess maybe this isn't the strongest analogy, but we had somebody who recognized that if milkmaids got cowpox, then they were essentially safe from getting smallpox, which was devastating. Well, like a century ago, I can't remember exactly the timeline there, but smallpox used to be a huge deal. But if they got this cowpox, they didn't really get the smallpox. And so, in relatively primitive fashion, as a matter of fact, I believe this was the gentleman who infected himself and all that stuff, but we discovered that if you have cowpox, you develop these antibodies. And if you can use the blood serum from that has the antibodies, then you can make a vaccine. So the thought is we might be able to use the serum antibodies from people who have recovered from COVID-19 to help others who are in the active phase of infection and the active illness. I'm not seeing a lot in the way of proof of that yet. I mean, this seems to happen. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the serological tests are something that are being looked at very, very carefully. We are still in the early days of reflecting not just on the medical implications, but the societal implications of those tests. I don't really know what he means by that, but one antibody test has received emergency use authorization in the U.S., according to the FDA. So we're still looking at how we're doing that. The CDC is looking at building a serological test. The New York State Department State Health Department has developed a testing regimen that will seek FDA authorization. So right now it looks like we're still looking at it kind of at a end the isolation and the lockdown, all that kind of stuff kind of phase. Also looking at future planning. I'm seeing a comment here from somebody who says, can you imagine if it turned out that 30 to 70% of the patients who were told they have COVID immunity actually didn't? So we're not entirely sure yet, and that's why we have to go through the tests here to figure out how accurate these things are. We don't want this to be the kind of thing where it's like, the trope is if you get chicken pox, then you won't ever get it again as an adult. You won't get shingles that comes from that. But we don't know if that's necessarily true when it comes to something like COVID. And so the last thing we want to do is to have somebody go through this disease, because in many cases, even if you're not going to the hospital and you're still considered to have a mild case, it's still pretty rough. I mean, I've read some firsthand results from or reports from people who have recovered, and we're talking about weeks of weakness and constant shortness of breath, which this crowd, of course, knows all about that. But we're talking about not even being able to get out of bed. I saw one report where he couldn't even lift like a spoonful of soup up to his mouth because he was just that weak. And of course, if somebody has some compromised immune system, they're at risk for worse infection. So you don't want to end up spreading this around again. So we need to get a better grasp on, does this confer immunity? Can the antibodies provide some kind of defense? Can we develop a vaccine from it? A lot of these things are, as far as I can tell, as yet unanswered. These are things that look like maybe they've been coming out in the last 24 to 48 hours, probably a little bit more well known in the healthcare side of things, because I'm pretty sure I've been reading about some of this for about a week now, where we're talking about, oh, come on. You got one of the dreaded ad blockers. So I'm trying to read. Let's see. We'll just pause for now. This is another report from San Francisco Chronicle that came out yesterday, that a couple areas, and one biotech company in San Francisco, biotech company in LA, have begun collecting blood samples, and now there's the paywall. So that's awesome. But we don't necessarily have, and they're saying it could hold the cure, could hold the key. We're not seeing a lot as far beyond could. So let's see. Oh, this is, what kind of science site is this? This is kind of getting into, okay, so we've got some assays and stuff like that. So, yeah. So, I mean, it's definitely an interesting idea, and I definitely, I'm not in the biotech research side of things deep enough to give you a real definitive answer. But that probably does give us some of the biggest hope for a vaccine and that sort of thing. So, so Andy also asks again from over in the UK. He says, I think the US is way behind the UK in testing and containment. I'm only going on the media information. Do you feel the US is doing all it can? This is a sticky topic because I certainly have my feelings. I would say, even in my capacity as a public health professional, essentially trying to be as agnostic as possible to the politics of it, no, we are not doing as much as we can. I believe a lot of the initial threat to this was misunderstood. I know, personally speaking, I did not think it was going to be quite the brush fire it's become. And I know a lot of my colleagues in public health have had similar reactions. I do also know that from what I can tell, people who should have known better also kind of downplayed the risks involved here. And again, I don't want to get too political on things, but I do not personally believe that we have marshaled our full resources into defense, treatment, research, any of the things that are impact the care of COVID-19 and the novel coronavirus. So, I'm not really looking to assign blame or anything like that, because a lot of these issues cannot be boiled down to one person or 1 year or anything like that. What this has done is kind of showed us a lot of the structural issues in our American healthcare system that we're really going to need to recover or repair once we're done with all this stuff. And I know there's going to be a lot of other people who are going to assign blame, and everybody is certainly free to have their own personal opinion on it. I know I do. I know I'm sure everybody watching this does, and that's fine. And there's room for healthy debate. But we're going to need to address a lot of these things so that when this type of thing inevitably happens again, we can be better prepared for it. We can be better prepared for the initial detection. We can be better prepared for the initial stages of mitigation or trying to stop the spread and that sort of thing. And we can be better prepared for treatment. So I know that's probably a little bit of a wishy-washy answer. I'm trying to thread a needle there because politics is such a sticky issue these days that, especially on the internet, nobody wins in any of those arguments. So I've gotten wise as I get older, and I try to avoid those, particularly in the clinical context, because in this area, I like to focus a little bit more on the clinical side. I will also probably talk out of both sides of my mouth, because I also feel that public health is inherently political, and we need to have these conversations, but we need to have them in a respectful, honorable way, and that doesn't always happen with things like social media, with text communications, where you all can kind of see my body language right now and things like that. If I make a sarcastic joke or something like that, that usually comes through. When you're typing and you say something sarcastically or something like that, it's real easy to misinterpret. So Andy also goes on to say, drive-through testing facilities where you're swabbed, logged, and informed if you are infected. I think those would be a really good thing. I believe we have had a few of those launch across the country. Drive-by testing. Let's see where we're. So according to GoodRx, which is a pretty decent site for Oh, sorry. I just got the action alert that we found out a couple hours ago, well, about an hour and a half ago, that the governor had extended the stay-at-home order. As I mentioned before, I've got Twitter going on this in this angle here, and that's on my phone because I can't figure out how to go live with the computer and make it all look nice. And the action alert just came through on there, so that's why I'm kind of doing sideways limbo there. Back to the matter at hand. Where can I get a drive-through coronavirus test near me? This is from GoodRx, that they often can link up people with decent prescription discounts. Not usually so much with inhalers because a lot of reasons, but yeah. So let's see. We've got, yeah, actually quite a few. 536 testing sites nationwide as of April 7th. So I suppose it's kind of relative. You know, and we look around, I see it's in alphabetical order here. So there are 2 in Alaska, which doesn't sound like a lot, but there's not a lot of people in Alaska. Quite a few in Alabama. Let's see if I can find how many we got in Michigan here. Let's see. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Oh, I guess 14. All right. So it looks like we have 14 in Michigan, which is not bad. We don't have any in my hometown of Kalamazoo as far as drive-through. I do know, I'm pretty sure we just opened like a kind of a walk-through at one of our clinics in town. So they're still trying to kind of mitigate a lot of that stuff and keep things safely. But yes, drive-through clinics would be fantastic. Stephanie, I'm in Michigan. So this was Governor Whitmer. Just extended our stay-at-home order through April 30th, which probably isn't much of a surprise. I know, you know, our Surgeon General, our CDC had been mentioning end of April for a while now. The initial executive order was only until the 13th before some of this, you know, before we had a good idea of what was going on and the politics and constitutional stuff. And they had to reconvene the legislature, which was controversial. It's been another reason I don't like to talk about politics is because most of it's complicated and half of it doesn't make any sense. So, too late. So drive-through testing, if you, like I said, if you just do a Google search for, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. Let me drop this link in the, that's in the watch party, pardon me. And then also in the chat. And I see we've got another question coming through the chat, through the main video chat, from Gloria. Thanks for coming in, Gloria. I apologize if that got a little gluggy there. Gloria says, would be great if the pollen cleared. Yes. Put me in the hospital a couple of weeks ago and hasn't let up. So, you know, another reason that we're trying to take some of these orders pretty seriously is, as I mentioned, this is, of course, you know, there's still a lot of other stuff going on. We talk, you know, coronavirus, certainly the elephant in the room, right? But still asthma, still COPD, still allergies. And that also led to some of the confusion when things really started to trend up, is because, you know, you look at what are some of the initially, what did we know were the symptoms of coronavirus disease, COVID? Well, shortness of breath, coughing, maybe a little wheezing, low oxygen. What are your symptoms of potentially a COPD exacerbation? Coughing, shortness of breath, low oxygen. What are some of the leading causes of a COPD exacerbation? Allergies, weather changes. I don't know how it is in your neck of the woods, but our temperature has gone up and down by about 20 degrees in the last couple of days. I know I've got some people who are struggling with that right now. Good friend of mine pops in every now and then. Haven't seen his name come by yet. Also, his name is Mike. Still stays very active. He's got a very active job where he's lifting weight, and lifting cartons and stuff all the time, but said, the weather changes got him. The temperature swings, the pressure changes. We had some wild weather the other night where we had hailstorms and we had all kinds of other stuff happening, which means barometric pressure changes. So I'm just going to pop over here real quick just to, again, I'm not super good with the Twitter, so I'm not sure if that's still like active or not. My phone went to sleep, so and sure enough, well, I guess that's the end of that. I'm gonna have to work on that whole Twitter thing. So but fortunately we didn't have too much in the way of tech issues here on the main broadcast, so that's helpful. Ooh, that probably didn't sound so good though. All right, so what else we got on everybody's mind here? Let's see what else might be going on. I do know that earlier today, the COPD Foundation went live for a little while. I got a notification about that. So let's see if I can see what that one was about. Let's see. What did we chat about today? If anybody's not familiar with the COPD Foundation, they are an invaluable resource for all things COPD. So I do appreciate them sticking with everything here. All right, so we had a couple of folks. Oh, this is a fantastic one. This was a good video. Probably should have watched it. Joined COPD Foundation Director of Community Programs Stephanie Williams, another fantastic RT, and Virginia State Advocacy Captain Christina Hunt, RRT, to learn more about the importance of keeping up with your exercises even while you are at home. So in this one, Christina is actually working on upper body exercises, which is fantastic. So, it is incredibly important for a lot of these activities to continue on. We talked about the importance of pulmonary rehab in general, and we know that a lot of people aren't able to access that right now. So we've got pulmonary rehab kind of serves two purposes. It has the physical activity purpose, which is what things like this video are addressing, and also the social aspect, which I try to encourage in settings like this. So with difficulties in getting to things like pulmonary rehab and things like that right now, it's all the more important. I know, I have to admit, I haven't been very diligent with a lot of my exercises and things like that. Things I like to do are not particularly accessible right now. My wife and I absolutely love to play tennis. Our usual indoor place has been closed. It was a gymnasium as part of the university, so that was closed. And all of our public parks are closed because people couldn't be trusted to respect the physical distance guidelines, and so they ended up having to close down the whole thing. So it's been difficult to find another thing that has been as enjoyable. It's hard to stick with exercise unless you enjoy it. So I have been trying to go out for some walks, probably see about going for a walk after this, although it was, again, dropped about 15 degrees since yesterday and gotten a heck of a lot windier out there. So Stephanie, what you got here? Watching a presentation last night by a woman who had been an epidemiologist for 30 years. She rocked, really knew her stuff. That was fantastic, excellent. Love my epidemiologists. One of the things I found interesting was she was talking about people with pre-existing lung conditions, lung disease, and said, well, they had found a good number of us in the ICU. She said the vast majority of people with COVID and lung problems had healthy lungs before they had COVID. So what are your thoughts on that? Oh, so that's a great question. We talked about that at length yesterday because that actually popped up on Twitter yesterday. Dr. Halpin out of the UK was mentioning that they had a study out there that was also showing that asthma and COPD were underrepresented in COVID cases. So let's see, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. we led with that yesterday. So if you want to get a little bit deeper dive, maybe check out yesterday's show. It should be available on YouTube or Facebook. But for right now, there were a couple of theories. Nobody still quite knows why, but there were a couple of theories. First theory was maybe there was something that is inherent to having a lung condition that is protective. They thought, well, that probably doesn't make a lot of sense because those folks with a condition that do have COVID tend to be more severe. Another thought was maybe it's something in the inhaled steroids that is somewhat protective. They weren't quite sure what to make of that, although there is some evidence that certain inhaled steroids and certain bronchodilators, like I remember formoterol, I think glycopyrronium, had some stopping effect on growth of other coronaviruses that they had studied. Of course, we don't know a lot about this one because we're still studying it because it's only been around for 5 months, 6 months, whatever. So we don't know if that's directly transferable. An interesting theory that I saw, I think was presented by one of our group members, was that people with COPD and asthma and chronic conditions do tend to have a lower immune system. One of the main presentations of COVID disease is this kind of wild overreaction by your immune system called a cytokine storm. That sends everything haywire and just messes up everything. You get stomach problems and you get sensory problems and you get breathing problems. You get all these things going on. But if you already have kind of a weakened immune system, you might not get that storm because your body simply isn't capable of doing it. So that's a possibility. One thing that I was surprised wasn't really mentioned, and I don't know if Dr. Ahmed mentioned that at all, was people with COPD know not to get sick. To put it one way, I think the folks with COPD, in particular, tend to take these things a little bit more seriously. And when it's cold and flu season, you got to kind of isolate yourself a little bit more because you don't want to get sick. And so as soon as you hear the words, go into isolation, don't get sick, take care of yourselves, you take it seriously. And I think of a lot of groups, I think perhaps you all have taken it the most seriously. You've seen all these things about, well, spring breakers, they all went down to Florida and they were like, woo, Corona, whatever. And then you could watch the spread of it out from spring break locations in Florida to everywhere else in the country. Leading once again to saying youth is wasted on the young because, well, we know that even older folks, everybody kind of, as you get older, it tends to go away a little bit, but even still, it's hard to get rid of that whole can't happen to me kind of thing. And so I saw a report earlier today about how a person went to, I believe it was a wedding and a funeral, and then ended up infecting a half dozen people who were there. They were asymptomatic. They didn't know. They went to these gatherings, infected half dozen people, and I believe 3 of them have subsequently died. We see across the country there are still half dozen states that don't have stay-at-home orders, that aren't taking it seriously, that have exceptions for X group, Y group, whatever. And so we're not seeing people taking it as seriously as they probably should. So I'm going to say good night to Andy real quick. Thanks for staying up late with us. I know you're about 5 hours ahead, so have a good night. Stay home, stay safe, get some good sleep. Don't have too many COVID nightmares or anything like that. So take care, man. For everybody else, still have about 10-15 minutes or so. If you got some more questions, let's get those in. We're having some really good conversation today about COPD, about COVID disease, all that kind of fun stuff. So So honestly, my biggest take, my suspicion, and again, I don't have the study to back it up. I don't know if we could even study it. We'll probably end up looking at what we call a post hoc analysis of the demographics of who got admitted, who got who was admitted to the ER, who got admitted to the general care floors, who got admitted to the ICUs, who got intubated. We'll be able to break all that stuff down. 6 months to a year from now, I'd be really interested to look at some of the demographic trends because based on the preliminary knowledge, my thought and my hope is that COPD is a little bit underrepresented because you guys took it seriously. And so the overall numbers were down. My suspicion will be the overall numbers are down, but if you do get sick with COPD, then you're going to be more likely to have the bad outcomes. So whether it's being on the ventilator, whether it's early mortality, whatever it is, because again, you're already kind of behind the eight ball with pretty much anything. So my thought is going to be that at the end of the day, it is going to be a lower overall number, but with higher or worse, whatever you want to say, outcomes. So. But great question. Appreciate that. And again, appreciate everybody stopping by this afternoon. So, and again, if I can just ask folks to like, share, spread, all that kind of stuff, all that. So going back over to the video comments here, checking in with Valerie. How are you doing? Doing a few exercises at home. So this is probably going back to the COPD Foundation talk. So I gotta get better at switching back around a little bit faster. So doing some exercises at home, not a lot, but I do them daily. Every little bit is going to help. And one of the things that we might be able to do to help with that, my wife works with obesity and metabolic medicine. She's looking at trialing some at-home workouts and giving feedback and all that stuff also on YouTube. So she's asked for my help to start putting some of those videos together. So we're going to take a look at those, and you might be able to get some pointers and maybe have a good laugh or two at the same time. So be watching for that in the next week or so. Looking forward to maybe trying some of that out this weekend and get that going. Excuse me. I'm going to mute for just a second here because I want to take another drink and I don't want to be gulping. All right, so be on the lookout for some video workout tips. Karen, hey Karen, it's good to see you, Karen. Karen, also a longtime supporter of COPD Navigator. Glad to see you're able to join us today. You are very welcome. She says, thanks for all that you're doing for us. Always, as always, I wish I could be doing more. As always, I wish I could be doing a lot more. I think we in the clinical community should be doing a lot more, but happy to do whatever I can because I can. So I'm going to, speaking of, Karen is also another state advocacy captain, very much involved in a lot of this stuff. Karen, if you want to, or at least remind me, or hopefully I can keep my head together enough for that. I want to reach out to Stephanie over at the foundation, and I noticed that they did kind of a collaborative video today. Wondering if I might be able to do anything with them to help them out a little bit. So hopeful, excuse me, hopeful that we can get a little bit more going with a lot of this online stuff, because again, I have thought this kind of thing has been the future for a long time. Karen is another one who has she's been involved with home monitoring and Bluetooth stuff and all these gizmos and stuff like that. One of my favorite stories is she was in the middle of a clinical trial with all this stuff, and she was doing her measurements, and her cat surprised her, jumped on her, and made all of her blood pressure and all that stuff kind of go haywire. And within like a minute, she got a call from the clinical site and was saying, "Hey, are you okay? Because all your vital signs just went wonky." So always, she tells it far better than I do, of course, but that's always been one of my favorite stories. So also appreciate Bonnie checking in late to the party today. That's all right. Better late than never. Thinking about probably at this point, seeing as today is Thursday, maybe next week doing a couple of these a little bit later at night, maybe in the 7 o'clock Eastern time. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. Maybe even doing one over the weekend. So if you have a preference, if you have a couple of people weighed in yesterday at 4 o'clock was still pretty good, 4 o'clock Eastern. If you have preference, suggestion, anything that you think I should know, or, you know, along the lines of what Karen was saying, if there's anything I can do better, if I can do more, please, be good to get workout tips. So yes, we will all for your wife's work on this. We'll definitely be doing that. You know, again, she works a lot with the, you know, folks with diabetes and who are overweight, many of whom have these lung conditions that go on at the same time, because if you can't breathe, then you don't want to eat properly and your nutrition goes awry and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of overlap between our worlds, and we like to support each other where we can. So again, be on the lookout for some of that stuff. And like I said, if there's anything else that you might be interested in, any other tips, tricks, suggestions, teachings, whatever, please let me know. Please let me know. Please ask around to your networks, spread these videos to your networks and you know, the contacts, so that they can tell me what they need to see. You know, the more information we can get out, the better. And the more information we get in about what needs to go out, that's how we get it out there. So that's where we're at for right now. We have another couple of minutes here to wrap things up here. So if you got any last minute questions, running out the clock here, let me know. Please get those in on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Let's see. Better check Twitter real quick here. Again, I'm not super used to doing that, so I think the video died a while back, but seeing if we have any comments. Well, we got about 40 minutes out of it, so that's not terrible. But yeah, we're going to be continuing on with all these things. So let's see. Cat jumping on my back was funny, but showed the investigator staff was really paying attention. Yes, absolutely. And so where I was going with a lot of this stuff, I think this kind of service, seems kind of weird to call it a service, but this kind of technique is going to be the next generation of healthcare. You know, we're seeing right now anyway, virtual visits where we have maybe a two-way video chat. I know we have some capability of that through some of the electronic health records where it's secure and private and all those things. We're seeing a lot of that now because, you know, again, we don't want folks to come in and sit in the waiting room where they're going to be exposed to who knows what and spread the disease like that. We don't want that. So why not do it like this? You know, there's a lot, especially, you know, if I were able to give you, you know, if everybody had a pulse ox, for example, I could say, okay, well, I want you to put your pulse ox on and show me what it says. Because all you have to do, and okay, hold it up to the camera, and that's the wrong finger. Yikes. You know, we'll just, you know, so show me what it is, and then I can do that. I can't necessarily be able to listen to you. There we go. Finally got a number there. With a stethoscope or something like that, but we may get to a point where I can have you put your phone up to your chest and listen to you know, maybe a couple of spots, and I can listen to your lungs that way. I know that there are some groups out there working right now that all you have to do is breathe into the speaker of the phone, and they have waveform analysis and stuff that can pick up different levels of different sounds. So, you know, high-pitched wheezing or something like that. If the profile matches a certain thing, it will trigger an alarm. You know, there's a lot that can be done keeping people at home so they don't have to worry about transportation or lugging oxygen around or anything like that, but still get the appropriate intensive clinical services that you deserve. So I think this kind of stuff is the future. I'm obviously a tech guy. I mean, I like sci-fi. I like, you know, I want a tricorder. I want all those things. So if we can get there, that would be fantastic. But we can only get there if that's what you folks want and that's what you tell us that you need. So All right, so we will go ahead. No more questions came in, so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for today. We will be back tomorrow at right about 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, at which time we will see if there's any other big news of the day. Otherwise, we will just sit and chat, tell some stories. Still looking to hear some good stories from the near apocalypse or whatever. I've been joking about that quite a bit, but looking for some good stories in there. Tell me what's on your mind. Tell me what you're proud of. What has been the biggest upside to the week? Anything you want to get off your chest. That'll be great. We'll wrap up the week on a very positive note. Also, just don't forget, if you happen to be watching this from the great state of Michigan, the Wolverine State, the Mitten, or the UP, please make sure you're checking out that link to get your feelings heard about the common formulary, so that we can make sure that we're getting the appropriate people, the appropriate medications, and that the decisions are made rationally, and clinically, and objectively, and scientifically, rather than financially. So with all that said, a little bit of soapboxing today. Hopefully you'll forgive me and come back tomorrow. Until then, as it says on the bottom of the screen, stay strong, stay safe, stay home. Keep breathing easy, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I will see you tomorrow. Take care, everybody.